General Assembly's back in town in Raleigh, and one of the big issues that is going to be front and center for the next few days is the question about whether or not North Carolina taxpayers should continue to supplement this refund to television and film production companies that come to the state of North Carolina to make their TV shows and their movies and things like that. Currently, if you're a television or a film production company, you get a 25% refund on what you spend inside the state of North Carolina up to $20 million. We've been taking some input on that this morning. Some people say, well, that means North Carolina gets to keep 75% of something they wouldn't have had before. But the question is that a reasonable incentive? And should North Carolina be in the business of incentives in the first place, trying to lure the movie industry here? I know that years ago when Wilmington first built the movie production company down there, the movie, what do you call it, studio, that, they were touting North Carolina as Hollywood of the East. But now the truth of the matter is movie companies go where they can get incentives to shoot their movies and their TV shows. Here to talk about that on the phone this morning from Raleigh at the legislature is a District 16 House of Representative member, Representative Chris Millis. Good morning, Representative Millis. How are you?
Doing very well. Good morning, sir.
Nice to have you on the show. Representative Brian Brown put us together. He said you were the man that had more information about this and could share it with our listeners than anybody else. Now, as I understand it, Representative Millis, you represent the District 16, which is Onslow, Pender. You live in Hampstead, right?
That is correct. That is correct, right there in southeastern North Carolina.
And so you're pretty close to Wilmington, and you're against these film incentives. I got to ask you, what kind of response do you get from the folks around your home area there when you speak out against this?
Well, for those who are informed about how this film tax credit works, which you articulated it right on your open introduction, is that it is more as a subsidy of anything else. Is that the individuals who are informed about it and how it works, they tend to agree with my stance about greater economic growth and greater job growth versus the government trying to choose how to spend other people's money on other people. Versus just allowing individuals to choose how they spend their own money by way of a uniform, low tax burden as really prescribed in the spirit of our Constitution. So, of course, there are those who are associated with the industry and have jobs they're associated with that, of course, want legislators to use the force of taxation to take from one and transfer to their line of work. But, of course, I believe it defies my oath of office. And that is not something that I can stand for.
So, in a nutshell, what is it that you're debating right now? Is it expanding is the legislature looking at the possibility of expanding film incentives, ending film incentives? What is the discussion currently before the legislature right now about this?
Well, again, the discussion is from my take, I think it's all cards on the table. It depends on what individual you're talking to. Of course, my stance is about uniform taxation for all, and I believe that if you study this aspect, you really look into it, that it's harmful for the citizens of this state. Anytime that you take from one and give to another, of course, you're going to have job creation. The question is it net job growth? Does it consider opportunity cost, and is it good for all the citizens of the state? But right now, there's all kind of things that's being discussed, a full-out extension, and to just continue to subsidize this industry by force of the taxpayers. There's a talk about restructuring it. There's talks about, it just allowing it to go away, which has already been done mathematically through tax reform. Again, people need to realize that we went from the 46th worst tax code in all of the nation to one almost in the top 15 in one fell swoop. And a lot of the reasons because of that was to actually sunset these special carve-outs and loopholes in the tax code that was designed to incentivize one industry or one business over another, and to restructure that to provide a low tax burden for all. So again, if the citizens of the state want to go back to one of the worst tax code in all the nation, then we need to do things like what's being discussed now, and that is extend this credit.
Let me play devil's advocate with you. I am a young college graduate. I just got a job working for a movie company down in Wilmington or Charlotte or somewhere, and I studied film production in college. And they came, Screen Gems or, one of the big movie companies came to North Carolina and hired me. Mm-hmm. I would not have gotten hired if they hadn't come to North Carolina to shoot their movie. Now, mm-hmm. the taxpayers are going to reimburse them 25% of my salary, but I wouldn't be working if North Carolina didn't have these film incentives. What's wrong with that?
Well, I'd actually share this with you, is that economics and also principles contribute to the fact that uniform taxation leads to greater job growth and greater economic growth. And that if it's good for the film industry in terms of to be able to get 25 cents for every dollar they spend, then why doesn't North Carolina do it for every business, every individual, and every sector of our state economy? That's what I would articulate. If we want to look at full-fledged, extending this, then we need to do it for all businesses in this state. That if a lumber company, if an agricultural business, if a office business, of a dentistry, for every dollar they spend in this state, then why can't they get 25 cents as well?
So your position is the government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers when it comes to the private sector.
Well, exactly. The last words you used were very important when it comes to the aspects of the private sector. Now, again, the government does play a role in creating an environment for job growth, meaning that there's constitutional abilities for us to make sure things of education, of infrastructure, of marketing assets of our state is a function to actually help create an environment for job growth. But I believe that it's egregious and it's outside of the spirit of the Constitution to take taxpayer dollars by force and to distribute that to a special interest by way of a tax code or a incentive grant. So again, there's some thin gray lines there, but I stand firmly in that there's a much difference between creating an environment versus directly creating jobs. And it goes back to what I stated earlier, is that people know how to spend their own money better than any bureaucrat or any politician. And of course, the aspects of government spending other people's money on other people, it's never going to have a return like it will for individuals choosing themselves. So again, I'm not just about jobs. I'm about greater jobs.
Yeah.
It's not about growth. I'm about greater economic growth. So that's where it stands. That's where it stands right now.
Again, if you're just joining us for the first time, we're talking to Representative Chris Millis from District 16. Representative Millis represents the area south of us, Onslow County, Pender County. Here's another concern. Let's say that we all agree with you that you can make the case to the rest of the legislature, Representative Millis, that you're right and that we should not be in this business. That just means North Carolina is going to stand on principle and have a more solid tax code and a more evenly distributed tax plan for all businesses. It doesn't mean South Carolina is going to do it. Trent McGee just pulled this up. South Carolina offers a 20% credit for cash and resident wages, another 20% for goods and services. Georgia's tax credit totals 30% with no cap. Of course, in North Carolina, we cap it at $20 million. Louisiana gives 30% transferable tax credit plus an additional 5% on resident hires. Currently, nationwide, 34 states, including Puerto Rico, have some kind of film incentive and program. And so if we don't do it, are we just running jobs away from the state of North Carolina? If this is the age-old problem that we've got with incentives. We talked about North Carolina losing the BMW plant to South Carolina 20 years ago because South Carolina took the North Carolina incentive package, just marked it up 15% and said, we'll give you more than North Carolina. I mean, we're having a war with other states trying to get jobs to come. So how does your position help North Carolina in the long run if the other states around us aren't going to participate in the same line of thinking?
Yep, very, very, very good question. And the answer to that is very simple. There's a lot of factors that goes into what makes us competitive as a state. not only for future business, but also the ones who are living and working and bearing the tax code, bearing the tax burden within our state right now. Both instances of future jobs coming out of the state and the jobs that we currently have here, we need to have policies that are focused on growth. To actually focus on what you're actually saying here is that in terms of this specific subsidy for this specific industry, is that the only debate right now is not not that the fact that the film tax credit loses money for the state of North Carolina. The debate is how much money does it lose, meaning that for every dollar we give, we're not returning dollars back. So if other states want to have a race to the bottom, then let other states have a race to the bottom. But if we provide certainty through our tax structure, if we provide certainty through a sound regulatory structure that focuses on protecting our environment, public safety, and welfare, but do it in a way that is very smart, efficient, and effective, and also to our investments in education, other things of that nature, is that we will be attractive to those businesses coming in. And again, the whole reason why that we lost BMW is not just about how much gravy we were willing to give them on their potatoes. It was also because of the way that our corporate tax structure was done from apportionment. There's other things that has into it versus just basically taking tax dollars and giving it to a specific business. Those policies is what I'm focused on. That aspect is what I'm focused on. And if we create that environment, then we're going to be very competitive regardless of other states that wants to subsidize specific industries.
I think it's interesting. The governor mentions in this article in the News and Observer today the fact that North Carolina actually gave credits to the Daily Show with Jon Stewart when it came to Charlotte to do the Democratic National Convention in 2012. And I think that's ridiculous. Can there be some safeguards put in to stop that ridiculous kind of incentives, but really actually look at a way? Are you totally opposed to any negotiations on this to try to at least come up with some sort of a plan that would eliminate the Daily Show getting incentives, but actually incentivize a company that would actually create long-term jobs? For instance, let's say that a movie company was willing to come in and put brick and mortar in Wilmington and sit down and develop a headquarters in the state of North Carolina. How would you view that?
I wouldn't view it as bad as what our current structure is. I mean, most economists that you speak to or other individuals, they'll say that the way our current structure is actually done, that it's egregious. But the aspects of carving out the Daily Show versus someone else is that what you're articulating is that you're asking me to pick winners and losers within a structure that already picks winners and losers. So what I'd say is that I wouldn't be totally against what you said in the latter per se. I wouldn't stand against it as fervently. But of course, as I've already shared with you, of course, my principle is aligned with strong economic arguments as well, is that uniform taxation leads to greater growth. It's just hard for elected officials to let go of the steering wheel and let people choose how they spend their own money, even though the other states may actually, dive into this aspect. So again, to sum it up, I wouldn't be as upset about it as what you shared there in the latter, but still it goes against the principles that I believe in that leads to the greatest growth that the state of North Carolina could have, and that is the way of just allowing the government to focus on its proper role and allow the individuals to do what they do best, and that is just work and produce for themselves and their families.
Well, there's no doubt it is a slippery slope when you start offering incentives. I remember years ago when the Democrats were in charge in the Senate. You may remember this or may not, Representative Millis. It probably wasn't 10 years ago that Senator Tony Rand from Fayetteville offered, I believe it was the Goodyear Tire Company, incentives to stay open. Now, it's one thing to offer incentives to a company coming to the state of North Carolina that are going to create jobs. His reasoning for it, and it passed, and they got incentives from the state were, well, what's the difference in trying to keep a current employer open by giving incentives and holding jobs and then creating new jobs? And so there was actually money given to this company in Fayetteville to help it stay open. Now, whether it stayed open or not, I don't even know the answer to that. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But that's the slippery slope that we're heading down with all these incentives, is that you can make all these arguments, but what's the safeguard to keep a politician from handing out an incentive to a buddy of his that owns a company that says, hey, you know what, I need help or I'm going to have to shut down and lay people off?
There is no safeguard. That's the reason why that under the purview of economic development, that we should be focused on public infrastructure. Again, public monies for public infrastructure. We should be focused on aspects of education. We should be focused on effective and efficient regulations, and of course, a tax code that promotes prosperity.
Yeah.
Because again, what you shared right there, you cannot prevent, you cannot stop. And people don't think that, well, these incentive grants are very small. It's not really a big thing. But I wanted you to know that, and I want your listeners to know that if this state never enters into another incentive grant with another company, that if as it stands right now today, you have unelected bureaucrats within the Department of Commerce that are signing contracts that are putting the full faith and credit of the state of North Carolina to these companies. And it's to the tune of almost $1 billion to the year of 2028 that the taxpayers are on the hook. Mm-hmm. People don't think that this is big. It is big. It is your money. And again, at the same time, I'm with you. There is other states that actually do this. It is a competitive game. We are not on an island here. But I believe overall in greater economic growth and greater job growth, a lot of policies that I actually articulate, but it's very hard to get my policies to stick because it means that elected officials have to get out of the way and admit that they don't create jobs, that the individuals create jobs. They can just create an environment for it to afford to prosper.
And I'll leave you with this thought, Representative Mills. This has been a great chat, by the way. We appreciate you taking the time on the spur of the moment. But, as I was explaining what happened with the Goodyear plant in Fayetteville, it just kind of struck me that that's exactly what the federal government did with Wall Street. And how did that turn out for us?
It didn't turn out very well. But at the same time,
the federal government was propping up Wall Street, trying to keep the companies from closing, with the whole idea that they're too large to fail and all that bull. And what ended up happening was the economy went to the lowest point since 1935.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's the same way on the GM bailout. The individuals who actually invested in GM, they got the shaft, but of course the actual union trades, they actually got the gold.
Yep.
And that's the way it goes when you allow government to have that type of power and authority over you, which again I believe is outside the spirit of the Constitution to do what we're currently doing, and hopefully that more elected officials are going to start to actually turn the ship here. And one thing I want to leave you with is that I'm not against the film industry or any type of business that wants to work and to prosper in our state. I'm just against taking tax dollars by force and giving it to another private business. That's egregious.
This will continue to be debated, and when do you expect some resolution on the House floor?
Well, it's up in the air. I believe that it's still going to be in the air and in limbo and potential. Who knows what's going to happen all the way until the final gavel drops in the short session.
So we may not really get a determination of what the state's willing to do on this until somewhere around between June 25th and June 30th, when this session will probably end.
Correct.
All right. Great chat. Thank you very much. I don't know if we've met or not, but I make a point next time I'm up your way or down your way to say hello. I appreciate you very much being on. That was a great information, great insight, and we appreciate you fighting the good fight for the taxpayers.
Well, that's no problem whatsoever. Anytime, I'm more than happy to be on, and thank you for what you do to inform your listeners. Very grateful.
All right. Nice talking to you, Representative Chris Millis.